Prince Louis didn't just disappear, the palace was hiding something, and King Charles just confirmed it. What really happened behind those walls? And why did it take this long to tell the truth? The silence inside the palace did not begin with panic. It began with calculation. When Prince Louis stopped appearing at public engagements, aides initially described it as routine, a scheduling adjustment, a child resting, a private family decision. But internally, calendars were not just being rearranged, they were being cleared. Entire blocks of time disappeared. Senior staff were reassigned. Briefings were shortened. And one particular corridor inside Kensington Palace became unusually restricted. Why would a temporary health concern require that level of operational control? At first, even members of the extended royal household weren't fully informed. Updates were limited. Conversations were compartmentalized. According to sources close to palace operations, a small circle was formed: medical consultants, senior advisors, and two of the most trusted private secretaries. The message was simple: contain speculation, preserve stability, avoid escalation. But what exactly were they trying to prevent? Publicly, the monarchy continued forward with composure. Prince William maintained engagements. Catherine, Princess of Wales, fulfilled select duties, though noticeably fewer. Smiles remained in photographs. Statements were neutral. Yet observers began noticing subtle inconsistencies, the kind that rarely slip through a system built on precision. Why were certain long-scheduled appearances quietly removed without explanation? Why were journalists discouraged from asking direct questions? And why was a rarely invoked internal privacy protocol suddenly activated? That protocol matters. Within royal operations, it is designed to shield minors from invasive reporting during medical or personal circumstances. It is used sparingly, almost never. Its activation alone suggested this was not a minor issue. It was serious enough to justify legal deterrence. And still, no details were offered. Inside the palace, tension reportedly intensified after what aides later described as an unexpected episode. The details remain guarded, but it was significant enough to trigger urgent consultations with specialists beyond the usual royal medical team. Not public physicians, not ceremonial appointments. Independent experts brought in discreetly. If this were routine, why step outside the traditional royal medical circle? The decision, according to insiders, came from Catherine herself. Protective, methodical, determined to ensure nothing was overlooked. But that move also created friction, because with every external consultant brought in, more people became aware that something was not as simple as the palace narrative suggested. And then came the moment that changed the tone entirely. When King Charles III finally addressed the situation, his words were not framed as reassurance. They carried weight, responsibility, regret. He did not speak of routine childhood matters. He spoke of what we failed to protect. Failed to protect. That phrase sent shockwaves through observers who understand royal language. Monarchs do not casually admit failure. Every word is measured. Every sentence deliberate. So what did he mean? Was this about a missed warning? An overlooked medical sign? Or something institutional, something larger than one child? Within hours of his statement, speculation surged beyond health. Commentators began questioning whether internal disagreements had delayed transparency. Had fear of public reaction slowed action? Had reputation management influenced medical decisions? The palace insisted privacy was the priority. But privacy and secrecy are not the same thing. And as whispers intensified, one uncomfortable question grew louder. If everything was under control, why did it take so long for the truth to surface? What the public saw was composure. What insiders describe was urgency. And somewhere between those two realities lies the fracture that would soon widen, not just within the family, but across the monarchy itself. Because this was only the beginning, and the next development would not come from inside the palace walls. The fracture inside the palace did not explode overnight. It deepened quietly behind closed doors, behind rehearsed smiles, behind statements drafted and redrafted until every word felt clinically safe. But safety was an illusion. After King Charles' admission, internal dynamics shifted almost immediately. Senior advisors began reassessing who knew what and when. Because once King Charles III publicly framed the situation as something that had not been protected, the question inside the institution became unavoidable. Protected from what? Medical uncertainty? public scrutiny, or internal oversight. At the center of that tension stood Catherine, Princess of Wales, a mother first, a future queen second. According to palace insiders, Catherine had pushed for expanded medical evaluations weeks earlier, not because there was confirmed danger, but because there were unanswered variables, subtle developmental questions, inconsistent assessments, opinions that didn't align. Why were initial consultations reportedly described as non-urgent? Why were follow-up recommendations delayed? And who decided the timeline? Those questions did not stay private for long. Sources suggest that during a closed-door strategy meeting, tensions escalated between Catherine's camp and senior communications officials. The communications team's priority was stability. Avoid panic. Prevent sensationalism. Maintain continuity. But Catherine's priority was clarity. And clarity creates risk. Because clarity requires acknowledging uncertainty. And uncertainty, inside a monarchy built on permanence, can feel destabilizing. Meanwhile, Prince William found himself navigating two roles simultaneously: heir to the throne and father to a vulnerable child. Insiders describe him as increasingly frustrated with the pace of internal decision-making. Why were updates moving through layers of approval before reaching family members? Why were certain briefings described as incomplete? Was this simply bureaucracy? Or was someone trying to manage the narrative before managing the problem? Then came a development that few outside observers initially understood: a subtle shift in media access. Select correspondents were quietly reminded of boundaries. Legal teams were placed on alert. The rarely used minor privacy protections were reinforced. If the situation was stabilizing, why escalate defensive measures? The answer may lie in what was happening simultaneously across the Atlantic. Because as palace officials struggled to contain speculation, Prince Harry was preparing to speak publicly, and not in vague terms, not in diplomatic phrasing, but with pointed language that would question whether the institution itself had ignored early warnings. Timing is everything in royal crises. Why would he choose this moment? Was it coincidence or coordination? And did palace leadership anticipate his intervention? When Harry's interview aired, it did more than reignite family tensions. It reframed the narrative. He suggested patterns, cultural habits within the monarchy that prioritized image over introspection. He implied that certain risks had been historically minimized to preserve continuity. He did not present medical records. He did not offer documents. But he introduced doubt, and doubt spreads faster than confirmation. Inside the palace, reactions were immediate. Emergency meetings, damage assessments, strategic recalibrations. Because now the issue was no longer confined to a child's privacy. It had become a question of institutional judgment. Had early concerns truly been dismissed? Did leadership hesitate too long? Or was this a family disagreement amplified into public spectacle? What makes this moment so volatile is not just the health uncertainty, it's the collision between private protection and public accountability. One side argues discretion was necessary. The other suggests silence enabled risk. And as those two narratives clash, the monarchy finds itself facing a dangerous reality. Once trust fractures at the top, it doesn't quietly repair itself. It demands answers. And the next revelation would make those answers even harder to contain.
The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I'm now in the early stages of that treatment.
What happened next did not feel like a family disagreement. It felt like escalation. Within 48 hours of Prince Harry's interview circulating globally, the palace moved from quiet containment to defensive positioning. Legal advisors were brought into strategy meetings that had previously focused only on medical briefings. Communications teams drafted parallel responses, one internal, one external. The tone had changed, because now the issue wasn't just Prince Louis' condition. It was credibility. Harry's remarks were measured, deliberate, and structured in a way that avoided direct accusation while still raising pointed implications. He spoke of patterns. He spoke of institutional habits. He suggested that when early concerns arise within royal systems, they are sometimes filtered through layers of reputation management before being addressed directly. He never used the word negligence, but he didn't need to. Inside royal circles, the implication alone was seismic. Was he suggesting that warnings about Prince Louis had once been minimized? Was he implying that senior leadership, possibly even King Charles III, had prior awareness of risks that weren't immediately acted upon? Or was he strategically reframing a private health matter into a broader institutional critique? Those questions ignited more tension than any confirmed diagnosis ever could. Sources describe an emergency consultation between senior palace officials and constitutional advisors, not because of immediate legal exposure, but because of precedent. If a senior royal publicly questions internal safeguarding decisions, it challenges the monarchy's image of unity and competence. And unity, historically, has been its shield. Meanwhile, Prince William reportedly reacted with visible frustration, not just at Harry, but at the timing. According to insiders, William believed the interview blurred lines between advocacy and accusation. He understood the need for transparency, but questioned whether broadcasting internal anxieties during an ongoing medical evaluation helped anyone. Was this about protecting Louis, or settling unresolved family tensions? And why now, when uncertainty was already at its peak? Behind closed doors, Catherine remained focused on one priority: stability for her son. But even she could not ignore how the narrative was shifting. What had begun as controlled silence was now spiraling into global debate. Commentators were dissecting phrases. Medical experts speculated without data. Social media amplified every inconsistency. The palace had lost narrative control. And then came another shock. A senior aide, one of the longest-serving private secretaries, reportedly raised concerns about internal documentation trails. Not wrongdoing, not concealment, but process gaps, delays in written follow-ups, verbal briefings that were never formally logged. In any large institution, those gaps can happen, but in a constitutional monarchy under scrutiny, they become combustible. Why were certain early consultations not immediately formalized in writing? Why were some risk assessments described verbally before being documented? Was it oversight or urgency overtaking procedure? The answers remain unclear. But the mere existence of those questions intensified pressure on leadership, because this was no longer just about a child's health scare. It had become about governance, about whether an ancient institution built on ritual could adapt quickly enough when confronted with modern transparency demands. As international media escalated coverage, public sentiment began to divide. Some defended discretion as responsible parenting. Others argued that selective silence breeds suspicion. The monarchy, once buffered by tradition, now faced real-time scrutiny amplified by global platforms. And in the middle of it all stood a child whose absence had triggered a chain reaction no one fully anticipated. But the most destabilizing moment had yet to come. Because as tensions mounted between father and son, heir and spare, mother and institution, a new internal conflict surfaced, one that threatened to widen the divide even further. And this time, it would not stay contained within palace walls.
No, it is very important to me, and I hope we'll be able to have a happy family ourselves, because it's been they've been great over the years, helping me with difficult times, and we see a lot of each other, and they're very, very dear to me.
The palace, long accustomed to controlling narrative and perception, found itself unraveling from within. After the explosive interview by Prince Harry, tensions shifted from concern to confrontation. A network of subtle power struggles emerged, revealing fractures few outside the inner circle had imagined. Catherine, exhausted and protective, reportedly clashed with senior aides over messaging. Her insistence on transparency for her son collided with long-standing traditions that prioritized discretion above all else. But why was discretion suddenly interpreted as silence? Why had decisions taken to shield the family now turned into the very thing fueling speculation? What had once been routine now felt orchestrated, and Catherine knew that public perception was no longer her only concern. Inside the palace, senior figures, including Camilla, Queen Consort, became increasingly visible in managing public appearances. Some insiders suggest her involvement was well-intentioned at first, a way to reassure the public, but tensions quickly escalated behind closed doors. Reports indicate that disagreements turned heated, with debates about timing, media strategy, and access to the youngest royal becoming almost confrontational. Did Camilla underestimate Catherine's determination to protect her child? Or was she deliberately asserting influence over messaging at a moment of maximum vulnerability? The clash, observers say, was further complicated by miscommunications and selective briefings. Charles attempted to mediate, but the weight of unresolved questions about protocol, timing, and the ethics of selective disclosure created a sense of paralysis. How could the palace maintain authority when internal disputes threatened to dominate headlines? Was it a failure of process, a failure of leadership, or a failure of trust? Then came yet another twist. New whispers suggested that information about Prince Louis' health, previously kept tightly guarded, had inadvertently reached external parties. Legal teams moved quickly to prevent leaks, but the damage was done. Even subtle inconsistencies fueled global scrutiny. Was this merely human error or evidence of deeper systemic issues? And if insiders were questioning the chain of command, what did that mean for the family's ability to protect its own? As tensions mounted, the public began connecting dots. Delays in disclosure, conflicting accounts, shifts in appearances. The more the palace tried to regain control, the more opaque the situation appeared. And in this opacity, trust began to erode. Was the monarchy's commitment to transparency genuine, or was it reactive, a desperate attempt to manage perception rather than address reality? The culmination of this internal turmoil was a stark reminder that even centuries-old institutions are vulnerable. Decisions made in private reverberate in public. Actions taken to protect one child can ignite questions about accountability, ethics, and leadership. The monarchy, often seen as unshakable, revealed how human and fragile it truly is.
Incredible charities doing really great work, but felt that we could give more, and how could we do that? And so the foundation idea sort of bubbled up as a sort of vehicle to be able to do more when we walked away from these engagements.
Prince Louis' absence and the subsequent revelations have exposed vulnerabilities few could have anticipated. The monarchy's traditional emphasis on discretion collided with modern demands for transparency, creating a tension that is still unfolding. Parents, leaders, and institutions alike are confronted with the difficulty of balancing protection, truth, and accountability. Every decision, every delayed disclosure, and every internal disagreement now carries amplified consequences. The saga also highlights the complexities of familial dynamics within powerful institutions. When personal stakes intersect with public responsibility, even small missteps can become global controversies. The cracks revealed are not only about a single child's health, but also about how decisions are made, how authority is exercised, and how accountability is perceived. Ultimately, this episode challenges long-standing assumptions about monarchy, privacy, and trust. It raises questions about whether tradition can coexist with transparency, whether leadership can act decisively under scrutiny, and whether the pressures of public life can be reconciled with personal responsibility. The answers remain uncertain, but the implications are undeniable. As the monarchy navigates this precarious moment, one thing is clear: the story of Prince Louis is no longer private. It has become a lens through which the world examines power, family, and accountability, and the consequences may shape the institution for generations to come.
If you enjoy in-depth coverage of the stories shaping celebrity culture and entertainment, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected for the next big story.